bear with me, please, because I'm still on a boat at the minute. I just got off this morning and I'm still rocking a wee bit. So, okay. Okay, can I ask ICT to start the live feed? Good afternoon, members, or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regulatory section of the Hybrid Planning and Regulatory Service Committee. Can I ask everyone to please mute their microphones at all times unless invited to speak by myself? For those of you who are physically in the council chamber, can I remind you that when speaking into your microphone, you need to wait until you see yourselves on the screen so that the live feed can pick up your comments. If you speak before your image is projected, those listening on the live feed or via Zoom may not or will not hear what you say. This is obviously particularly important in the case of a vote being required. Audio recording is being used to assist in preparing formal minutes. Therefore, anyone participating in the meeting consents to it being recorded and being live streamed on YouTube. Agenda item 1, we have apologies from Councillor McGeown and Councillor O'Dowd. Do we have any further apologies?
Yes, Chair. Chair, I have apologies from Councillor Ashley Mallon.
Say that again, Councillor Hockey.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillor Ashley Mallon.
Okay, many thanks. And Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, just an apology at the minute. Well, he'll be along. Councillor Wilson, he will be along at some point during the phase of this part.
Always many thanks, members. Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest. We'll take declarations of interest now or as we proceed throughout the meeting. Okay. Yeah, agenda item 3, report from the head of planning. We have 2 items for decision. 3.1 is advance notice of listing of telephone kiosk, which is outside 4 Aubrey Avenue in Portadown. And I'm going to call upon Julie Brown, Senior Planning Officer, to present this item. Julie is online.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Department for Communities wrote to the Council on the 23rd of June seeking our views on the proposed listing of the telephone kiosk at Aubrey Avenue, Tartarahan, Plantyloo Road, Portadown. The listing is being considered under Section 80, Part 1 of the Planning Act. DFC has assessed the merits of listing the kiosk against their published criteria, and in this case, the significant criteria include style, proportion, ornamentation, plan form, quality and survival of interior, age, authenticity, authorship, social, cultural and economic importance, rarity and local interest. They have noted also that there are alterations detracting from the building. So in their survey, they at Appendix 1, they have described the kiosk as a KS6 model of cast iron construction built to Sir Giles Gilbert Scott's standardised design of 1935. They advised that despite the loss of the original glazed panels and the replacement with perspex, this is still an important example of an iconic piece of street furniture, which is now increasingly rare. And it's within the visual range of the listed vernacular public house and greatly adds to the distinctiveness of the settlement of Tartarahan. The survey sets out historical information regarding the possible age, and it advises that it appears at this location between 1954 and 64, as shown on maps there. And it bears a St Edward's crown motif, which was introduced in the mid-1950s. It's located within the settlement development limit of Tartarahan, as defined in the Craigavon area plan. There's no relevant planning history on the site, and a constraint search has identified that it is adjacent to a local landscape policy area and is also in close proximity to a number of listed buildings, 4 in total. The Council's views have been sought regarding the proposed listing, and a draft response is attached to Appendix 2, which includes the planning status, the constraints, and advising that whilst the Council has no objections to the proposed listing, it would be supportive of the property owner if they were to raise any concerns. So it's recommended that members would approve that draft response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julie, and members. I think I take it that you have all read the draft response. If there's any queries that you or anything that you just want to add in, over to yourselves. I'm going to bring in Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, it's just a point of note I've experienced recently in another case where a resident was wanting a similar phone box of similar age moved because it was providing an obstacle for access to his property with there was a farm accessed off, you know, a small, very small development, but up, you know, the tractors and trailers and stuff had to make a quite sharp turn, and the phone box was just on the opposite the turn off, and ideally he was wanting it moved, and I made inquiries to that effect, but then in the whole intervening period the phone box was listed, and that really complicated things because BT wouldn't even provide a price to the gentleman for the costs of just moving it a few yards because it was listed. So, you know, that I'm not quite sure as to the process of delisting something even temporarily to get it moved, but it just sounds like a complete nightmare if you had to do it. So I'm just wondering, in this circumstance, and looking at the photos, there is a property quite close, and I'm just wondering, you know, I know there some consultation takes place, but I don't know what we can do about this. But in terms of just the views of that resident, given the fact that this is going to be in place forever and a day, you know, is that something they should be made more aware about? And, you know, again, it's down to this listing issue where residential views aren't really taken on board or given much weight. It just doesn't sit that well with me in that circumstance. But, you know, we are where we are. I'm just really raising it as an interest point, if you know what I mean, generally.
Thank you very much, Alderman Wilson. Julie, do you want to come back on that, or do you know what was the local residents, were they advised that this chaos was going to be listed for forever and a day? No.
No, Chair. The process is that HED have a statutory obligation to consult with the owner and the district council. So in this case, I had gone back to them seeking clarification of who the owner was, and it said that they told me they had consulted with BT, who they understood to be the owner. That's the only consultation that there is. There's no public consultation on it as such. You know,
No problem. Many thanks. Is that happy enough, Alderman Wilson? Okay, members, we're happy enough with the response to the department. Can I get a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Duffy.
Yes, I'm happy enough to propose it. Agree with everything Alderman Wilson said. You know, who's to say they wouldn't need disabled parking or anything like that in front of that house in years to come, but we are where we are.
Many thanks, Councillor Duffy. Just sort of before I take a seconder, Julie, do you know, is there any way that likes of a kiosk can be temporarily delisted and then for the likes of Alderman Wilson's query to move maybe a couple of meters and then listed again, or is it because of exact siting of it?
no, it's sorry, Chair. It's the actual structure that's listed. So if anyone wanted to make any alteration to that, including an alteration to move it, they would have to apply for this building consent. You know, Alderman Wilson had made the point before with that other kiosk about, you know, the turning, and it was getting in the way of the farmer. You know, I'm not sure. Again, it would be a case between who the landowner was and who the owner of the kiosk was, whether they would even facilitate a move off it, but they would need to apply for this building consent to do any alterations to it.
No problem. Many thanks. Okay, members, can I get a second? We'll have a proposer by Councillor Duffy. Can I get a seconder to the draft response? Seconded by Councillor Donnelly. Thank you very much. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Move on to 3.2, notice of opinion from Department of Infrastructure on a regionally significant planning application. And I'm going to bring in Sinead McAvoy, Planning Manager, to present this item. Sinead's in the house. Just 2 seconds, Sinead, we're going to bring in Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. I just have to declare an interest on this item. I think of some family members who work in that industry, which is, subject to this plan application. So just have to declare myself and not take part in discussion on this item. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Duly noted. Over to you, Sinead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a notice of opinion from the Department for Infrastructure on a reasonably significant planning application. It's a Section 54 application which has been submitted to seek non-compliance with 2 specific conditions attached to the Lough Neagh extraction permission. Initially requesting the removal of condition relating to the restriction in operation during the hours of darkness during winter months, which is condition 7, and a variation to condition 12 to provide a level of flexibility to the operating companies when seeking to replace the sand barges. Condition 7 excludes operation in the hours of darkness during the winter months to avoid disturbance of the site selection features, notably wildfowl. Additional survey work has been completed by the project ecologists, and further shadow habitat regulations assessment has been reduced to accompany the application. The National Environment Division stated in regards to condition 7 that caution is required, as it cannot be conclusively determined through the surveys that displacement from foraging areas, particularly during very cold weather, can be ruled out. They have recommended, therefore, that a 12-hour undisturbed foraging period for birds from November to February is conditioned, with barge operations confined to the period of 0600 hours to 1800 hours during that period. As such, a condition that reflects the comments of this expert consultee would be attached to the decision notice rather than its removal. This is reflected in condition number 6 on your attached correspondence. The application is also proposing to develop land without compliance with condition 12, which, if approved, would result in a change to the size of the barges currently permitted to be operated. DFI are content that there will not be any visual disturbance on sensitive receptors through the non-compliance of this condition in its present form and the inclusion of an amended wording. Officers would advise that DERA, National Environment Division, Water Management Unit and Inland Fisheries, Shared Environmental Services and our own Environmental Health Department, as well as the other council's Environmental Department, have all been consulted and offer no objections to the proposal, subject to the conditions and the Section 76 legal agreement. Officers therefore recommend that we respond to the department, confirming that the council do not wish to request an opportunity to appear before and be heard by the Planning Appeals Commission or other such persons as so appointed in relation to this opinion, as per Appendix 5 attached.
Thank you very much, Sinead. Members, I'll assume that you've all read the Appendix 5 and do we have any questions in terms of this report? Okay, members, can I get a proposer proposed by Alderman Wilson? Can I get a seconder? Second by Councillor Duffy. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Going to move on to item for information, which is 3.3 with an update on planning caseloads. And I'm going to bring in Head of Planning, Damien Mulligan. Damien, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Members, the report before you is in relation to an update on planning caseloads, and what I can inform you is that the number of decisions that were issued by the department during the month of June was 187. Number of applications received over the same period, 135. And the live caseload at the moment is 1,036, which is 52 down on last month, which is very good news, members. It means our caseload has been driven down and clearly going in the right direction. Number of call-ins over that period was 3, which brings it to 9 for year to date. Members, just to mention, we were supposed to bring a report, an enforcement quarterly report to you this month. But unfortunately, the statistics have not been able, we haven't been able to run those because of an issue with the IT system, but they will come before you at the next meeting. We're hoping the interim will be able to correct that and bring the figures to you at that point. But happy to take any questions or queries, Chair.
Thank you very much, Damien. Members, I'm assuming you've all read the report. Do you have any questions or queries? Nope. Thank you very much, members. Move on to agenda item 4, report from the head of building control. We have one item for decision, 4.1, street naming report for Hayfield Meadows, and I'm going to bring in the building control manager, Kevin Fitzsimmons, to present this report. Over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. A request has been made to name a housing development consisting of 42 dwellings off the Highfield Road in Craigavon. The applicant has proposed a number of names, with the preferred name for the development being Highfield Meadows. The reasoning for this name is that it is adjacent to the established Highfield area and is also accessed off the main Highfield Road. A copy of the applicant's proposals, site layout, and location in Appendix 1. It is recommended that members approve the name Highfield Meadows.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Members, you've all seen the report. We all agreed. Can I get a proposal and a seconder? Proposed by Councillor Duffy, second by Alderman Wilson. All agreed. Thank you very much, members. Moving on to 4.2, which is item for information, an update on building control and property certificate applications workload. Building control manager Kevin Fitzsimmons is going to present this report. Bring you back in, Kevin.
Again, thank you, Chair. Members, for information purposes, the report provides members information relating to the workload of the building control department. It details out the list of the core responsibilities. And in Appendix 2, you have the statistical information in relation to the applications received and processed. And this for noting purposes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Any queries or questions, members? Nope. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, corresponds 6.1 is from the NIA planning consultations for agricultural developments. Members have any questions, we'll take them from the floor or online. Nope. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 7, AOB, any other relevant business, and Councillor Lavery has requested one, and it's regarding the overturn of residential development in Gosford Forest Park. I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery now.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, as you just said, you probably recall the application when it came to committee. I think it was in January 2022, and it went through a significant amount of debate in this chamber. And ultimately, this committee decided to refuse that application unanimously. I think it was Councillor Nicholson at the time, myself made the proposal and seconded, but we were all in agreement, given that we had concerns about the impact it would have on Gosford Castle, Gosford Forest Park, as members will know, very heavily protected environmentally and things like that. Obviously, the developer then appealed that decision. What the Plan Appeals Commission was overturned, as I found out this week. When I was reading the report from the Plan Appeals Commission, it seems that they've almost ignored the debate that kind of occurred in this chamber. We did consider everything that was in that report, and ultimately we decided that there was no betterment sort of argument. And my concern is that, it's almost overriding, a democratic act here in this chamber. And as an example, is at the end of the road, the Plan Appeals Commission have a final say. Because again, I'm not from that area, but I remember at the time there was a large number of objectors and things like this here who might just be upset that it's come to this. And I don't know if they have any recourse. I don't know if there's any third party right of appeal at this stage from Plan Appeals Commission. But certainly it was disappointing from my view when we did consider all the facts and did give a thorough examination of all the papers and all the evidence, that we took a decision that this seems to have been thrown out straight away, which was disappointing. Again, if any further information or clarity on the is essentially the end of the road, unless the objector step in with a very costly, judicial review option, which I know is a last resort. But I just found it very disappointing, and I just wanted it to raise at committee, because normally our decisions don't get overturned. They're normally fairly solid, and we do consider them fully in this chamber. But I just found this one to be very disappointing. Thank you, Chair. Anyone has any information on that?
Thank you very much, Councillor Larvey. I'll bring in Alderman Wilson, then I'll bring in Damien. Are you happy enough bringing Damien? Go ahead, Damien.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Larvey. Councillor Larvey, totally empathise with the comments you've made. Yeah, that application, when it came before members, obviously the officers were recommended approval for it, and members had a very interrogated the officer recommendation, and as you said, a significant number of members, if not all of the committee, agreed that the application should be refused, and officers defended that refusal very robustly at appeal before the Planning Appeals Commission. Look, the Planning Appeals Commission, they will look very clearly at the planning merits of the case, and the fact that the Planning Committee has overturned an officer recommendation and has reached a decision on that basis doesn't necessarily come into play. It is more about the planning merits of the case. And they are an independent body who will focus on those particular issues. Now, in this case, what they did was look at, firstly, the fact that there was a fallback position, and that fallback position was represented by an extant planning permission. It was granted by DOE quite a few years ago, which allowed for change of use of the castle and also for 23 garages on the application site or the appeal site. That really did sweat. If you read the report, it seemed to sweat significantly for the PAC, because what they were saying was you could have 23 garages on that site, and if you compare that to the erection of 11 dwellings instead, well, you have to then look and make a sort of balanced assessment. And what they decided was the 11 dwellings represented betterment over the fallback position. And they based that on the fact that there was a reduced amount of built development on the site. There was a restoration of the garden walls. There was a new historic linkage that was restored. Number of factors that sort of influenced their decision, but very much based on what could have been built on the site under the extant permission against what this application represented. And that's essentially what their case was. So in terms of what the options are now, you're quite right that, if there is going to be a challenge to this, it would have to be through the High Court. It would have to be through a judicial review. There's no third party right of appeal. And so, unfortunately, for anyone who did want to challenge the PAC decision, it would be a case of legal challenge to the High Court. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Damien. Alderman Wilson, do you want to come back on that? And then I'll let you back in, Councillor Larvey, if you so wish.
Yeah, no, thanks. I suppose it is quite a unique situation in terms of this committee. You have the odd situation where the officers had delivered a verdict, which we overturned, and then it was found to be correct. So I suppose in that way, it's strange that, it's went to that stage and we're back where we started again, much to the annoyance of many people, obviously, in that regard, not least the users of the park and those, living close by. With that all being said, I'm just wondering, in terms of the verdict of the Planning Appeals Commission, is it then a reversion back to the original approval as it stands and all that entails? Or I read some of the PAC report and it did catch me in terms of that fallback position, but the walled garden and that is contained within that submission. I'm just wondering, is all that still then, is what will be developed what we were presented with then in many ways, if there is no other recourse, or those opposed to it don't take any further action? Just trying to sort of future it. What is the outcome of this? What involvement will planning have in ensuring, in the event that no further action is taken, legally, say, for instance, against this application? Sort of my interest is that, this committee and our own planning service, take an interest in ensuring that, all policy points are strictly adhered to. And I say with the caveat that there isn't any further action by those who were opposed to it, in those instances. Just to future it out in my own mind, I'd be interested to know.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Alderman Wilson. Yeah, I suppose from here, what the applicant will now be able to do is to go and implement the scheme that came before committee, but subject to the conditions that were imposed by the Planning Appeals Commission. So they actually imposed 12 conditions, and amongst those conditions, it included, for example, removal of permitted development rights. So they can't do anything beyond what they've got planning permission for. So any further work that they would want to do would have to come before the council. They've also required that there's no external lighting, and that's for biodiversity reasons. And then there's other conditions on there, for example, how the landscaping will be managed and so on. So they're fairly stringent conditions, and details of those would have to be submitted to the council for approval. In some cases, there's conditions around retention of trees as well, and so on. So yeah, look, I think the conditions will ensure that the the scheme that has been approved, you can't, there's no room for maneuver on that, and so it'll be implemented as seen, if you like. But yeah, 12 conditions to be complied with along the lines of what I've mentioned.
Alderman Wilson, want to come back?
Yeah, just briefly, and thanks. And I suppose going, into the future again a little bit, I'm just wondering with council with planning committee, I suppose, sort of recording their unanimous objection to this at that meeting, should something further, such as the discharge of a condition or something completely new or some revised aspect of that come before this committee, how do we stand then legally as having had a predisposed opinion looking forward against the development in its entirety? How do we sit then as members of the committee when we go to make a decision, if you know what I mean? Because we've had quite a unanimous verdict against it, which has been overturned. Do we look at it freshly without those, or from the public's perception, is it, oh, those people are against that? How do we get that level of assurance built back into it? I just don't recall a similar situation developing, if you know what I mean, in my time on committee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Alderman Wilson. Yeah, I suppose it goes back to the point that members will be well aware of about being open-minded. And look, while you've taken a decision previously on that application, if the details do come before you, it is about approaching with an open mind. And the details will be about making sure that while you did have issues regarding the development itself, it will be about making sure that you take a decision that ensures that the details will make that scheme, as best as it can be. So, for example, about the management of the landscaping, making sure that the management scheme for that is acceptable. It will work. It will ensure that the landscaping is maintained in perpetuity, for example. There will be other conditions that will come before you. It's about just approaching those conditions with an open mind, irrespective of the position that you took on the original application. And look, if you want, there could be a similar point could have been made about officers trying to defend the appeal when the recommendation from officers was to grant approval. But when we're placed in that position, we represent the council, not ourselves, and so we would defend the council's decision robustly, irrespective of what our own individual opinion or professional opinion might be. We're paid to work for the council, and we defend the council's position. So it's almost a similar position for yourselves. You're asked to maybe consider something and approve something, even though you may not like or agreed the scheme previously. But it is about an open mind. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you very much, David. Do you want to come in, Councillor Lavery? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Damien, for those contributions. It's certainly a very informative one. I think it is just disappointing. When DOE give the initial approval, I think it was even discussed at committee that it was very much they were looking to secure, the refurbishment of the castle and the apartments or stuff. And I think they had to show a bit of flexibility with regards to the garages to sort of get that across the line in order to, protect that historic site. if the flexibility was asked for additional housing development, maybe DOE wouldn't have been as open to flexibility, but we'll never know. And this is where we are. So it's certainly kept in my mind when all future things come to this committee, that we just need to be very careful. But I think it just is disappointing the way this one turned out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aubrey, and thank you very much for raising it. That was a good conversation. Members, we're going to have a break now to 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock, sorry. It's boring you, sir. Just testing us. Okay. See us back at 4. To start the live feed. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5, applications for planning permission to be considered by the committee as per the schedule of planning applications. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the planning section of the hybrid meeting of the Planning Regulatory Service Committee. Can I ask everyone to please mute their microphones at all times unless invited to speak by myself. For those of you who are physically in the council chamber, can I please remind you that when speaking into your microphone, you need to wait and see yourself on the screen so that the live feed can pick up your comments. If you speak before your image is projected, those listening on the live feed or via Zoom will not hear anything that you say. This is obviously particularly important in the case of a vote being required. Audio recordings are being used to assist in preparing the formal minutes. Therefore, anyone participating in the meeting consents to it being recorded and being live streamed on YouTube. Also, during the course of this meeting, questions may be asked by councillors who are members of the Planning Regulatory Services Committee of Planning Officers, applicants for planning permission, objectors, or those speaking on their behalf. In doing so, councillors endeavour to ascertain the information which they feel is necessary to enable them to determine the application. However, members of the public should note that councillors will not reach a conclusion as to whether an application should be approved, refused, or deferred until the debate on the application has been concluded. Okay, we have a number of appendices to get through here, members, so we're going to move on to Appendix 1, which is application LA 08 2022-1179F, and it's a site for action of dwelling and garage associated site works. And we're going to bring in Nicola Craney, Senior Planning Officer, to present the report and PowerPoint presentation. Nicola. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to point out there's a typo. The report refers to LA08 2021-0130 in a few places. The plan and reference was actually LA08 2021-0130, so the suffix is actually O for outline. Planning permission was granted for a dwelling and garage at this site under LA08 2021-0130, subject to conditions. This application is to remove planning condition number 9, which requires improved and maintained visibility displays at the junction with Ardmore Road prior to development commencing. The proposal has been made under Section 54, which is a specific application to remove or vary a planning condition within an extant planning permission or within an extant approval. The recommendation is to refuse, and the reason for refusal is set out in the planning report. DFI Roads have been consulted and have recommended this application should be refused. Policy AMP2 of Planning Policy Statement 3, which is access, movement and parking, is the main planning policy and provides the criteria for assessing a proposed access to a public road. The current road standard is less than 2.4 metres by 10. The visibility standard required is 2.4 by 70. Policy MP2 requires a planning permission will only be granted for a development proposal involving a direct access or intensification of the use of an existing access onto a public road where such an access will not prejudice road safety or significantly inconvenience the flow of traffic, and the proposal does not conflict with Policy MP3 access to protected routes. The applicant has provided a full plan of the works proposed at outline stage, including the removal of fences, hedges and a new road curb to comply with the required standards. The applicant did complete the relevant forms and he served notice on the owners of the lands in question at that time. The policy confirms that conditions can be used to ensure the access will be upgraded prior to the development commencing if it is substandard. Thus, a planning condition was applied. Officers in consultation with DFI Roads are of the opinion that the removal of this condition is not acceptable on the grounds that the works are considered necessary to provide a proper, safe and convenient means of access to the development to be carried out. Officers are of the opinion that the removal of this condition is unacceptable as the proposal will prejudice the overall aim of the condition and as such will not accord with the SPPS and PPS 3. I'll just go through the PowerPoint presentation. Next slide, please. So you can see the location of the site. It's just, it's within the settlement of Derryad. Next slide, please. And this is the site location plan. Next slide, please. And just for information, that's the settlement limit for Derryad within the Craigavon area plan. Next slide, please. And this is an aerial context then of the proposed site. Next slide, please. Just the detail of the access road with the access lane with the Armagh Road. Next slide, please. That's just an aerial view looking towards the site and the access. Next slide, please. This is the view then from the south looking towards the site and the access. Next slide, please. This is the view from the north looking south towards the access. Next slide, please. This is a close-up then of the access up to the site. Next slide, please. Again, a close-up of the access, the laneway that goes up to the site. Next slide, please. This is then a view then towards the Armagh Road from that laneway. Next slide, please. This is the existing laneway. The site is further back, further up that lane. Next slide, please. This is just for information, this is the site itself. So it's a site just overlooking Lough Neagh. Next slide, please. And that's a view from the site just looking towards the road. That concludes the presentation. Oh, sorry, there's that's the access approved under the previous outline permission. And next slide, please. I think I've just got an extract of the permission and the decision notice, just for information. Sorry, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm going to bring in Una Gibbon to make representation as the agent in support of the application. Una, you have 3 minutes. Are you there? Oh, there you are.
Here, I'm good to go if yours are good to go.
Yep, in your own time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. The issue is whether the proposed dwelling would result in intensification of traffic on the existing lane. And I also consider that compliance with the condition in question would actually undermine the privacy and residential amenity of number 23 Ardmore Road. The applicant is Paul Scullion. Paul has lived all his life at 17B Ardmore Road, which is one of the 6 houses already on the lane. He lives with his parents and his wife and son. The plan is that he, along with his wife and child, would move into 17B and out of the existing, would move out of the existing house at 17B and into the proposed dwelling, and his parents will stay on at 17B. This means that there'll be no increase in the resident population on the lane and no change in the overall volume of traffic. The application was accompanied by a report carried out by SW Chartered Engineers, which included a count of the traffic entering and leaving the lane over a 3-day period. The dwellings on the lane typically generate 2.33 vehicle arrivals per house per day and 2.38 departures per house per day, which is a very low number. It would be unreasonable to say that there would be additional trips as a result of the dwelling, because that would mean that the applicant and his family were being double counted. As there will be no intensification in the use of the existing access, the proposed dwelling will not result in harm to road safety or inconvenience road users. Also, PSNI collision statistics for the junction were obtained for a 10-year period. There were no reported collisions within a 50-metre radius of the laneway. We'd like to assure the council that there's no prospect of anyone else other than the applicant living in the new house. The applicant and his wife as yet do not have their own home, as they live with Paul's parents. And if you've seen the site in question, you will see that it's a stunning site on the banks of Lough Neagh, and there's no prospect of Paul and his wife selling off what would be their dream home. So rather than defaulting to a general rule, I would ask you to consider the facts specific to this case. The applicant already lives on the lane, and he will continue to use the access to Armagh Road except from a different dwelling. Therefore, there's no intensification of the use of the access and accordingly no justification for improving the sightlines. Therefore, the condition may be removed and the residential amenity of one of the houses on Armagh Road will be protected. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes my presentation. Thanks for your time, and I can take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Una. Well within your time. We also have Mr. David Sheard from DFA Road Service, who is here to answer questions regarding road issues. So members, any questions of Councillor Duffy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just really can't get my head around how they're saying there's going to be an increase in traffic when they already live on the lane. And just, how did they come to that conclusion? I would like to ask Road Service that and Nicola. Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duffy. I have something similar written down here. So can I sort of ask David, can you sort of come to some sort of bit of information on that, please?
Okay, DFI Roads, we understand the argument the applicant, the agent makes, but we don't accept that on the basis that it's an extra house, it's an extra household that's being created. Families expand and change over time, people come and go, and the house, they have outgrown the existing house they're in and need to expand into another one, and therefore that is the intensification in numbers of people that are coming and therefore the level of traffic that's coming in and out of the development. Now, the trip generation that they've quoted being quite low, trip generations typically change, but we talk about the average trip generation of properties, and we're just counting it as one additional property, creating another additional level of traffic over and above what's already there. Intensification is deemed to occur as defined in Development Control Advice Note 15 as being over 5%. There are 6 houses on the lane at the moment. An additional one will mean there's a 16.7% increase in the number of houses, and therefore a similar increase in the level of traffic would be expected. And that's really the basis of our reasoning.
Councillor Duffy, do you want it back in?
Yes. Chair, I'm still at a loss as to get my head round, you know, just because you have a new house, you already live in the lane, there's going to be no more traffic in and out, bar the ones that, you know, at the time of the building of the new house, which would be an increase for a short period, but I just can't see where they've come to that conclusion. Sure, that's just all I have to really say on it.
It's just really sort of the percentage wise is really what the way you're taking it in terms of one house. There's 6 there already, so they'll produce 7, so it's about 15% increase rather than increased traffic. I just are using, David, is that right? Rather than sort of what we are looking at here is we have a household that is basically being split in 2 with half the family moving into another house. But you're saying it's nothing to do with that, it's to do with sort of down the line, then obviously there'll be sort of young people coming through the house as well. I'm assuming that's what the way you're looking at in 15%.
Yes, that's what we would see. Oh, sorry. Yes, that's the way we would see it. an additional household is being created. It's an additional building that's there to accommodate a brand new household. They've outgrown the existing household. Children grow up, go out to work, start driving cars, start their own family, have their own children, and the cycle continues. Talked about the chances that the house will not be sold. I don't think there's any reasonable condition that planning service can allow a planning approval to say the house cannot be sold. There's nothing to stop it being sold at any time, as far as I'm aware. So basically, it's a new house, a new building, a new household being created, which will generate a brand new set of traffic.
Many thanks. Do you want to come back, Councillor Duffy, or do you want to hold fire for the time being? Okay, Nicola, do you want to come in and then I'll bring in Alderman Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that the issues raised there are in the planning report. Those issues were considered in terms of the number of trips and the fact that the applicant lives along the lane. I mean, all of those issues were raised and have been considered as part of the planning assessment. Having been out to the site myself, the access is very below standard. I mean, I actually had to open the windows of my car to listen to the traffic to be able to safely exit that laneway. It was one of the worst accesses that I've come across. So I do totally appreciate the requirement in terms of intensification within the site.
Many thanks, Nicola. I'm going to bring in Alderman Wilson, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I suppose it's just, again, the term getting your head around it's been used and to help me get my head around it. This is obviously, the word substandard has been used. Many other houses utilize this substandard, as has been quoted, access point. And if it's considered substandard, why is it only considered substandard now at this point if other people have used it and have received planning permission down through the years? Why is it only an issue now?
And there, Nicola, please. Thank you.
I would assume it's on the basis that most of those houses are in prior to that current policy, so they wouldn't have applied then. And at the end of the day, this proposal is for a new dwelling, and we have to go through the requirements of policy in terms of providing an appropriate access. And that would be a requirement under the policy for PPS 3.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm going to bring David in to sort of clear up.
Similar to what Nicola said, I'm not aware of the history of there being any other recent applications on the lane. Those houses have been there for a long time. We haven't had the opportunity to make comment on the suitability of the access. So the intensification hasn't been raised as an issue up to now. The comment was that there are no recorded accidents. The PSNI have no accident history on the site. Of course, the fact that there hasn't been a recorded accident, which is an accident involving personal injury, doesn't mean to say the access is safe.
Thank you very much for clarifying that there, because I know myself, whenever I'm arguing with yourselves on a number of occasions, you say that there's been no PSNI reports, but it's clearly identified that there's cars going through hedges. But I'm going to bring in Alderman Wilson again here.
That's a fair point. I know a number of road access and exits that or entries and exits that are considerable issues from a safety perspective, but the information about the lack of PSNI reports is something that DFI then used to say we're not prioritizing any improvement works at this junction at this time, but it seems to be the reverse in this instance. But just to get further clarity in terms of both sides of that, where the visibility display requirements are in place, is that land not then in the ownership of the individual concerned? Is that why it hasn't been referred to in the engineered report or the engineered response to which brought forward the removal of that condition. Then is it the case that, to improve that display, you would be accessing lands that aren't in control of the applicant? Is that the case?
Nicola, do you want to clarify, please?
Yes, that's correct. The visibility displays were asked to be upgraded on the outline application, and they submitted amended drawings to show the improved visibility displays, and they completed the correct certificate to notify the owner of those displays, so that the applicant was aware of that requirement at outline stage. It's not something that was put upon them without them being aware. They were fully aware, and they submitted the required details through that application process, and that was why it was deemed acceptable and the condition was applied, because we went through those processes.
Dave, I'm going to bring you in to clarify.
Yes, I'd just like to clarify it further that during the previous outline application, we had discussions with the agent to see what improvements we could make. And we came to an agreement that he gave us information that he could get control of the land to the north to remove the hedge and fence to improve the visibility in that direction. Now, improving the visibility in that direction, it has to be recognised that that doesn't make the access fully compliant with our standards. The visibility to the left-hand side coming out of the access is also poor. The width of the lane is poor. But on balance, we felt through the negotiation, getting that improvement to the visibility display to the north was giving us an overall betterment and allowing us to get to a situation where we could approve it. Whilst it's not going to meet the full standard as described in DCAN 15, it was seen as being sufficient betterment to allow us to recommend approval for it. But that did involve land outside the applicant's control originally, but the agent had notified us that his client could get control of that land.
Right, thanks for that, David. I'm going to bring in the Deputy Chair, Alderman Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's sort of been covered there by Alderman Wilson, but it was just initial there. They put in for the visibility. They say they could have amended it to, if that hadn't been done, that application probably would have been turned around quite blank. So we wouldn't at this stage. It's just the fact that they brought in where they could amend the visibility, and that left it more for the planners to approve. Whereas if that hadn't come in, the application wouldn't have been approved at all. If we had brought in the amended display, or
I suspect we'd have been in this position for the previous application. It would have been brought forward as a recommendation for refusal because of the substandard access. But because it was agreed, we were recommending approval.
Okay, members, any other questions? Yeah. Members, so over to you. I'm going to move into debate. What are your views? I'm going to bring in Councillor Duffy, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as many as a councillor here who travel up and down real roads, and when they're canvassing, when whatever, we've come out of a lot worse than laneways than that there. But it would be interesting to see if the other houses up the lane could now take civil action against the houses at the bottom of the lane, say that their lives are in danger when accessing this here. And as Alderman Wilson said, the PSNI work differently. Our road service tend to say, it's down to accidents on the road, but it'll just be interesting to see whether to use this here today in a court case further down the line as to they can't get in and out of their laneway safely.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Lavery, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presenters there. It's one I listened to with great interest and read the papers, and certainly I do have a lot of sympathy for the applicant in terms of they're living there already. There's houses there on that laneway. But ultimately for me, this comes down to safety. And as been pointed out, like legislation has changed so that safety characteristics are improved to prevent the chance of further accidents and ultimately helping improve people's health and well-being. As I said, ultimately this does come down to safety, and with a recommendation here for a refusal from DFI. Obviously the original application was approved provided they could sort out the access and like giving them the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to get the access sorted for whatever reason, all our landowners and things like that. But ultimately, it comes down to safety, and if the sightlines there aren't meeting standards, I think that's very much in my mind. I think maybe the refusal here is the best way to go, but I know it's a disappointing one. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Lavery. Alderman Wilson and Alderman Kennedy.
Yeah, it is a difficult one because, it's from the safety perspective, I suppose the committee's responsibilities in that regard. It does pose a very awkward question when you're, disposing of a condition that's designed to create a safe environment. But then I get the other point where there's already use of that. And, the authorities aren't concerned with it, or, well, they're not concerned, but they're legally, they're constrained on what, they can do about it, really. But I'm wondering, is there an option, generally for allowing some more time for, the applicant to pursue those issues around the visibility displays and how he could achieve them? I know we're ultimately going to have to make a decision on it, but I'm just wondering, has that been done, in the planner's view? Have all those options been exhausted? Hence, the last resort is to try and have that condition removed. Would that be your take on?
Again, we're moving into debate, but I'll let you ask that question. Nicola, you okay to answer that?
The outline permission still extant, it's still available. It's up to the applicant to be able to adhere to the condition. So within the timescale of the permission, if they are able to secure that's up to them. So this wouldn't be taken away from that. Any decision today wouldn't be taken away from the fact that there is a permission there and conditions which, if they adhere to those, that reserved matters could be submitted.
Thank you, Nicola. Alderman Wilson, do you want to come back there?
Yeah, thank you. I know I'm reversing slightly, but I'll get into first gear again very quickly afterwards. But so just to be clear, it's only regarding condition 9. It's not about the actual approval under outline. So no, that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson and Alderman Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Wilson just sort of covered it again there. I was just wondering, has the applicant stated point blank that they can't give access to this declared visibility displays, or is this just a shot in the dark thinking they can get away without additional cost clearing visibility display?
That's possibly a question you might want to ask the agent, but I mean, as it stands, we just have to consider the application as presented. Whether they have that possibility or not, that's up to them and negotiations, but we wouldn't be fully aware of that. But they've made this application so that they wouldn't have to be able to provide those, but the outline permission is not affected. The principle of development on the site, if they're able to adhere to those conditions, is still there.
Thank you, Nicola, for that. Una, did you grasp that question there? Are you able to substantiate on it, please?
The applicant hasn't made any approaches to the third party about the visible displays. And it's not a question of that he just simply doesn't want to do it. But what he doesn't want to do is have to disturb a third party, acquire their land, undermine that person's privacy, undermine a residential amenity for the sake of access improvements that aren't actually required. And I go back to the point of, is there intensification in the use of the access? And there isn't. When you have the person that's looking to live in the house, they drive up and down that lane at the moment. They're part of the vehicle count on that lane, and they'll still be part of that vehicle count on that lane whenever their house is built. So I think he is very reluctant to approach the third party to acquire their land, and particularly I don't know if maybe Nicola's time to put up one of the photographs on the screen of the person's house who's affected by the sight lines. It's a bungalow number 23 Ardmore Road. It's very close to the edge of the road with a fence and a substantial hedge in front of it. And to interfere with the front of their garden would involve taking down the fence, setting it back and removing the hedge. It's going to bring that bungalow much closer into the public realm, onto the public road, and would undermine their privacy. And we believe that more harm than good would come from complying with the condition. So that's why he has not made the approach. He does not think it's necessary that the residential amenity would be undermined. This is the residential amenity of the person whose land is involved in the sight line. All for a case where there is no intensification in the access, because the same person who lives in the lane will be using the access.
Thank you very much, Una. I'm going to bring back Alderman Kennedy, please.
Thanks, Una, for that there. But what really sort of rails me is that this application wouldn't have got approval in the first place if he hadn't put in where he was going to get the amended visibility displays. So if he hadn't put in the amended, it would have been turned down, outline point blank. So I think it's up to the applicant to adhere to what he said he was going to do, under my opinion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alderman Kennedy. Yeah, members, we've asked questions, we have debated. Any more questions or any more thoughts? Okay, going to move you on to a decision. Can I get a proposer and a seconder?
I propose to accept the officer's recommendation.
Going to bring in Alderman Kennedy here.
I propose to accept the officer's recommendation. It's up to the applicant to try to comply with what he put in that he was supposed to do at the start.
Thank you very much, members. We have a proposer. Can I get a seconder? Alderman Wilson, second by Alderman Wilson. Thank you very much. We all agreed? Thank you very much, members. All agreed. We move on to Appendix 3. So Appendix 2 has been withdrawn from the schedule due to a request from officers' report that has come too late. In the interest of procedural fairness, this item has been withdrawn. Alderman Kennedy.
Appendix item 3, I have pecuniary interest. I set out the meeting. That's okay. I've lobbied on Mr. Hill's behalf in the past. Member of the planning committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. Alderman Wilson or Kennedy. Yeah, members, Appendix 3, application number LA 08 2019 0768, which is an approval. We're going to bring in Roisin Hamill, Principal Planning Officer, to present this report. There's also an addendum report has been circulated. Roisin, I'm going to bring you in now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the replacement of an existing turbine approved under application O2006-1147-F to a proposed 50-metre tower and 54-metre rotor diameter, including a section of earthen cable on lands 165 metres southeast of 20 Craigavon Road, Armagh. The application is being presented to committee tonight as the proposal has generated more than 4 objections from 4 separate postal addresses. Members will be aware that an addendum report was circulated earlier today following the receipt of additional representation on this matter. I'd also at this stage like to add a line to proposed condition number 2, which reads, the protocol shall also include measures to address any breach of the condition and the time frame for the implementation of such measures. The application site lies in the open countryside and comprises an existing wind turbine within a compound area set out in stone gravel. The compound area is situated at the end of a stone surface laneway, and a number of residential properties are located to the northeast and southeast of the application site. Officers have considered the proposal against the relevant policies, including Plan Policy Statement 18. In assessing the impact on human health and residential amenity, the potential impacts arising from noise, shadow flicker, ice throw, and reflected light have been considered in detail in the report. In terms of noise, given that the predicted noise levels fall within the limits set using ETSU, officers in consultation with the Environmental Health Department are satisfied the proposal will not have an unacceptable impact on the residential amenity of nearby properties subject to the recommended conditions. In terms of shadow flicker, officers are satisfied the effects of potential shadow flicker can be mitigated against by conditions requiring the use of shut-off software as set out in the report. In terms of visual impact, planning permission was previously granted on this site for the erection of 2 33-metre high turbines with associated works in 2007. To date, only one of the approved turbines has been erected. However, as that permission has been lawfully implemented, the second turbine approved under that application could be constructed at any time. For that reason, in assessing the visual impacts of this proposal, officers considered the impacts against the impacts of the 2 approved turbines at the site. As set out in the report, the screening and backdrop provided by existing vegetation and the separation distances from critical viewpoints, officers are satisfied that the proposed wind energy development does not result in an unacceptable adverse impact on the visual amenity and landscape character of the area. In order to ensure the second turbine will not be erected in the future, officers consider it appropriate to attach a Section 76 legal agreement to the permission should members be minded to approve the application. A number of objections to the proposal have been received, and all of the issues raised have been considered in detail as set out in the report. Officers consider that the proposal complies with the Strategic Plan and Policy Statement for Northern Ireland and all other relevant plan policies, including PPS 18, and are recommending that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. And I'll just take you through the slides. And the blue arrow just donates where the site is in the general area to the southeast of Armagh. This is the site location map submitted with the application, and the red line is where the turbines to be located. And this is an aerial photograph of the site within the wider area. And just a closer aerial photograph of the site, and you can see the existing compound and turbine to the south of those farm buildings. This is a photograph from the Gosford Road looking towards the southeast. It's probably difficult to see in that slide, but the turbine is there behind the mature trees at the sort of in the middle of the road. And this is another photograph taken from further down the Gosford Road looking towards the east. And this is another photograph taken from the Gosford Road looking southeast again. So again, you can see the existing turbine there. And this is a photograph again from Gosford Road, close probably to the junction with Retarnett Road, looking east towards the existing turbine. This is a photograph taken from the Craigavon Road, looking towards the northeast. Again, you can see the existing turbine there behind the trees. And this is just another photograph from the Craigavon Road, again looking towards the northeast. You can see the existing turbine there. And this is a photograph of the turbine taken from the yard area at number 20 Craigavon Road. And these are just a few close-up photographs of the turbine on site. And that's just showing the base of the existing turbine on the ground. And these are the substations that currently exist on site, and they will remain, they're not being removed. These are photo montages that have been supplied by the agent in support of the application. And as we've already said and set out in the report, there is approval here for 2 turbines. One has been erected, the second turbine could still be erected. So we've used that, obviously, or the agent has used that as the baseline for providing these photo montages, showing you what the 2 approved turbines would look like in comparison to the one that's currently under consideration, which is in the bottom photograph. And again, this is a photo montage looking west. Again, you can see the impact of the 2 turbines as approved in comparison on the bottom to the turbine that's under consideration. And again, this is a photograph of the junction with Retarnett Road, showing you the impact of the 2 turbines as approved in comparison to the one that's proposed on the bottom. And this is a photograph again from Craigavon Road, and the top is the 2 turbines as approved, and the bottom is the turbine that's under consideration. And these are the proposed elevations that have been spitted for the turbine. And this just gives you an idea of the proposed layout. So it's practically the same place as the existing turbine. And that's just giving you an indication of the approximate location of objectors' properties in relation to the turbine. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Busheen. We have Mr. George Clark to make representation. In objection to the application, we also have Mr. Conor Foy to make representation as the agent. Members, Mr. Clark is in the jacket, am I right? Yeah. And just to make you both aware, I'm sure you've both been informed you have 3 minutes. And once you start, the ticker will start. And once it hits 3 minutes, I'll have to cut this off. Okay, so we're going to bring in Mr. Clark first of all to make representation. Okay, Mr. Clark,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 3 minutes is not enough time for me to deal with the detail of this application. There are many issues that need to be covered. I will just have to focus on a couple of the most pertinent points. The first point is that the separation distance as set out in policy has not been adhered to in this case. In this case, there are 4 or 5 properties within the minimum separation distance of 500 metres. The case officer says that that separation distance is not applicable to this case because it is a single turbine. However, if one reads the relevant policy PPS 18 and the various guidelines connected with it, it is clear if one takes a balanced view across the entirety of the policy, one will find that the terms wind farm, wind turbine, wind energy development, those sort of terms are largely interchangeable. And indeed, if one looks at other aspects of policy, for example, ETSU and noise, one will find that predominantly, if not exclusively, refers to wind farms as opposed to single turbines. For example, if one looks at the guidelines in relation to shadow flicker, one will find that wind farms are not mentioned at all in that aspect of the guidance, and that exclusively refers simply to turbines. However, the better view is that, and the proper view is that there is no distinction to be made in this case between a wind farm and a wind turbine insofar as separation distance is concerned. And to move to a secondary point on noise in light of the ticking clock in front of me, it's accepted by the applicant that the noise limits are exceeded in this case. However, the applicant depends on the claimed financial interest in relation to specifically property 20A Craigavon Road, and financial interest, if indeed there is financial interest, allows higher noise levels to apply at that property. So thus 2 questions come from that point. Firstly, is financial involvement applicable as a grounds to allow a higher level of noise at that property? If you involve the rationale of the case officer in this case, it's not, because ETSU specifically states that the financial interest, this is what it says. It says higher noise levels are permissible where the occupier of the property has some financial interest in the wind farm, not in the wind turbine. Second point, finally, there is no evidence whatsoever that the occupier of 20A Sagacan Road, or indeed the other property, has any financial interest. The case officer says in this case that there is evidence. There is no evidence. And I've spoken to the case officer today, and she has confirmed to me there is simply no evidence. All that there is, and it has not been on the planning portal, is that claim, a letter from the occupier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. I'm going to bring in Mr. Conor Foy to make representation as the agent in support of the application. And the same applies to you, Mr. Foy. Okay.
Good evening, members. Not to get back on all the points made by Mr. Clark, the application has been made in terms of covered all the main items that are covered in PPS 18, namely noise, shadow flicker, bats, geology, and there was visual assessment done as well. We also have the fallback position, as rightly pointed out, on the fact that there was 2 turbines already approved there with 1 operational. In terms of the noise element, it's widely accepted that ETSU and Associated Institute of Acoustics documentation is acceptable for wind turbines and wind farms. Obviously, with wind farms, the numbers can vary. Single wind turbines are single in nature, and you need some stick to measure them with. So it's applicable across Northern Ireland, and in fact across the UK and Ireland. In relation to the query on Mr. Paul Hill, Paul is a son of the applicant Morris Hill and lives, as you've seen on the farm buildings there. Financial linkage can vary. It can mean you can be a director, it means you could be a shareholder, but it also means you could potentially have get your electricity paid or receive a payment from that building or from that application. So there's a variety of reasons there, and I think from a economic or confidentiality element, there's no need to necessarily state what financial linkage amounts to, as long as you confirm that you are financially linked. And I think in this instance here, it's very obvious that given the familial link to the applicant being his son, that there is a linkage there, and the fact that he lives in proximity to the existing turbine as well would back that up. So I suppose just from a general point of view, the application was assessed on its own grounds, and what we have here is an existing turbine which in reality has very little conditions associated with it. What we're going to get here is a turbine that's going to be have noise conditions, shadow flicker conditions, and there's going to be protection for all the local people or any objectors or anyone there, that if there is an issue, the council have some recourse potentially against it. And you know, I suppose what we're saying here is it's an improvement. And the other point I would like to make is this turbine is a brand new machine. It's going to increase the efficiency of this site, utilising existing infrastructure. So we're not removing any of the existing elements on the site. And I suppose where we are, generally speaking, in terms of renewable energy, it's what we need to be doing. We need to make our sites more efficient, and obviously only if they meet certain criteria. And this site meets those criteria, and we support the application on those points.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foy. We have also received written representations and objection to the application, which have been received from Angela Quinn and Mr. Gregory McLaughlin, also Dave Russell and Alison Hamilton. Okay, members. I'm going to bring in Alderman Wilson to start the ball.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose, you know, with this particular, we've had a run of these applications. This seems to be a DOE decision originally. Is that the case? And then it's creating this, you know, spectre of an extant approval. And then we have a new application, which this council and this new way of working, you know, although it's not that new now, but in terms of post RP or pre RPA, you know, the landscape's quite different in that regard in terms of the responsibilities and what this council does in terms of dealing with its own planning applications. And, you know, we've had a few, you know, decisions in the past which have been similar in terms of DOE decisions, and then council seeking to put, you know, applications through their paces, so to speak. And, you know, this is another one of these where an extant approval exists for 2 turbines. So is it the view really, Roisin, directly to you that, you know, what is proposed is a betterment? Because we've had, you know, we've had the whole Gosford thing last time where, you know, the PSC considered, you know, the houses a betterment over the garage blocks. So is this something similar where, you know, as opposed to 2 turbines, we have before us a single turbine, albeit, you know, a bit bigger? Is that the overriding factor on all this, where ABC Council Plan department have stated that this is an opportunity for betterment? And I suppose as our, you know, the agent has said here, there's a lot more controls and conditions placed on this. So is that the overriding reasons really I'm just trying to get to in this regard?
Thank you very much, Alderman Wilson. I'm going to bring in Roisin, and then I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Wilson, you're quite right. Yes, there is an extant approval on this site. 1 turbine has been erected, a 2nd turbine could be erected, and I suppose that's the baseline for us considering the visual impact here in terms of the proposed turbine. But I mean, we've looked at the application on its own merits. We've rigorously assessed it. We've asked for a number of reports, as the agent has pointed out, in terms of including a noise report, a shadow flicker report, photo montages. There's been a bad activity survey, and all of those have been assessed by our consultees. And on the basis of the information that's been provided, you know, we're satisfied that it fits with the requirements of PPS 8. It complies with policy in its own right. Obviously, in terms of the visual assessment, you'll have seen the photo montages. We have to take into account the fallback position that there could potentially be 2 turbines here. Is, you know, and in terms of the visual impact, is it unacceptably adversely, you know, that it would require us to justification to refuse it? And, you know, we're of the view that it complies with PPS 18 in its own right, and that's the reason we're recommending approval.
Thank you very much, Roisin. Alderman Wilson, are you happy with that response? Councillor Lavery, I'm going to bring you in.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Roisin. As mentioned, there's a previous approval for 2 turbines on the site. Only 1 was built. It's a situation essentially that the options are to either approve this new application for the single turbine, or risk the 2nd turbine being built that was already approved, or it's just a situation where that even should this turbine be approved, could the developer still fulfill out the previous application to build a 2nd turbine, so there could still be 2 turbines on the site? Just clarify that. And then I might have another question or 2 following up, and just clarify that for myself, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lavery. I'm going to bring back Roisin.
Yes, Councillor Lavery. The original approval has been implemented by the erection of 1 turbine, so he could go ahead and build the 2nd turbine. Now, even if we were to approve this application for the replacement of the existing turbine, technically he could still go in and build the 2nd turbine, which is why we're recommending the legal agreement to protect against that happening. Obviously, you'll have seen in the report, if members are minded to approve this, we would be, you know, suggesting that a legal agreement would be put in place that he couldn't erect the 2nd turbine.
Go ahead, Councillor Lavery.
Thank you. And then just following on that, obviously don't want to prejudice anything, but say that we were to approve with that legal agreement, and then say, for example, a developer were to create the 2nd turbine from the original site, would then council have recourse to require that removal or that development to stop? Just to clarify, because I don't, you know, obviously we're discussing here and noise levels and things for 1 turbine. Say, for example, you know, both end up getting built, obviously that might change the noise situation for the residents. So I just want to really understand what we're voting on here. Thanks.
Roisin, go ahead.
Yes, Councillor Lavery, were he to build the 2nd turbine in contravention of that legal agreement, yes, we could take action.
Thank you very much, Hussein. That clarify. Thank you, Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, it's maybe one for the agent or Roisin, in terms of as the turbine sits at the minute, and looking into the future, if a second turbine was built, is much concern around this. What controls are on the current turbine, if any, as opposed to what's being proposed with this new one? So, because I know there are objections in place at the minute. I'm just keen to get the difference here between what exists versus what could potentially exist versus what this is before the committee today.
Over to you, Roisin.
Thank you, Chair. As I've already said, there's an existing turbine there. The second turbine could be built. In looking back at that 2007, it was a 2006 application, it was a 2007 approval. There's only 2 planning conditions in that approval. There's no conditions in relation to noise. There's no conditions in relation to shadow flicker. So technically the applicant go in, build the second turbine. And if the noise were, to cause a problem, we couldn't take enforcement action because there's no actual condition with regard to noise or shadow flicker or dismantling of the turbine or any of those conditions that we're recommending in terms of the current application.
Thank you, Roisin. Going to bring back Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, and just for total clarity, I'm not a sound engineer in any way, but that would be a doubling of the amplification. It would be amplifying that by 2 times in terms of any existing nuisance, if you like. If he was able to have a second turbine under the same exact conditions, obviously.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Roisin, can you clarify that?
See, I'm not an acoustic expert myself, but technically, yes, it would. There's potential that any noise would increase with the erection of a second turbine.
Thank you very much, members. Happy enough. Any other questions, members? Okay, we're going to move on to debate. Seeking your views or comments. Okay, Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. It is an interesting one. But the decision we're faced either to refuse, in which case you could end up with double the turbines with less possibility for enforcement, less noise criteria and so on. Or we approve this application, which ultimately averts the previous course of action and provides greater reassurance for enforcement, particularly in terms of that legal agreement which was discussed. I guess it may not be welcomed by the objectors, maybe if they don't want any turbines there. But this is the decision we're facing, which one of these 2 do we choose? And to be honest, I've been tempted to go with the approval to provide those certainties around enforcement and prevention of any second turbine on the site, which would double the impact. I think that's the choice that we're faced with here, Chair, and I'd be tempted to go with the approval on this case for those reasons.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Lavery. Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, and it happens now and again where I'm in tune with Councillor Lavery on various issues, and this is certainly one of them where I think we have there's an obvious opportunity here for betterment, and I'm looking back at those very recent PSE decisions, and I would be of exactly the same views as Councillor Lavery on this, where that element of control I feel is a very important issue versus a doubling and an amplification of the current issues if we don't go with it. So that's very much in my mind. So yeah, just my view at the minute.
Okay, members, any other comments or views? Okay, no. Can I get a proposer for the recommendation, which includes the conclusion to approve subject to the inclusion of the conditions set out in the report with the successful completion of Section 76 agreement as set out in the report? Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just listened to all the comments and I do agree with Alderman McCulloch, Alderman Wilson. Happy to propose that we go with our officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Can I get a seconder? Second by Councillor Armstrong. We all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Okay, move on to Appendix 4. Yeah, members, Appendix 4, application number LA 08 2021 1189 F. It's for an approval. Going to bring in Roisin Hamill, again, Principal Planning Officer, to present the report on PowerPoint presentation. Over to you, Roisin.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a full application for the erection of a dwelling and garage with associated site works on lands adjacent to and south of 10 and 21 Rathfriland Street, Block Brickland. The application is being presented to committee as a statutory consultee has recommended that the application be refused. The site is located on land within the settlement limit of Loch Brickland on white land that's not subject to any specific land use zoning. The site is located in an area of archaeological potential for Loch Brickland as defined in the Banbridge New Mourne Area Plan 2015. The plan recognises that the settlement limit of Loch Brickland is designed to provide for additional development opportunities which utilise current capacity within the settlement limit in order to maintain a compact urban form and protect the setting of the village. The SPPS and Policy OS 1 of PPS 8 state that the development that would result in the loss of existing open space, irrespective of its physical condition or appearance, will not be permitted. The site takes in a large portion of the curtilage of number 10 and an area of scrubland. The area of land is not fenced off for public use, and as such, officers are of the opinion that it does not perform any open space function as detailed in Annex A of PPS 8. The erection of a dwelling on the site is therefore considered to be acceptable. The assessment and consideration of the planning merits of the proposed development is informed by PPS 7, Quality Residential Environments, and in particular Policy QD1, the addendum to PPS 7, Safeguarding the Character of Established Residential Areas, and also supplementary planning guidance. As set out in detail in the report, the proposal has been fully considered against the provisions of these policies. Officers consider the proposal accords with the SPPS, Policy QD1 of PPS 7, and complies with the supplementary planning guidance. The road is proposed to be extended to allow the construction of the new access for the dwelling and to facilitate 11 of communal parking. A new 2-metre footpath will also be extended around the new road access, and 3 in curtilage parking spaces are proposed. Officers in consultation with DFI Roads are satisfied that an acceptable means of access can be achieved and sufficient space within the curtilage can be provided for. NI Water have advised that while there is available capacity at the wastewater treatment works, there is a public file sewer within 20 metres of the proposed development boundary, which cannot adequately service these proposals as the receiving file sewage network has reached capacity. They go on to state that the public system cannot presently serve this development without significant risk of environmental harm and public disamenity, including pollution, flooding, and detrimental impact on existing properties. However, officers note that an appeal reference 2021 A0231, the Planning Appeals Commission considered that the imposition of a negative planning condition was reasonable and necessary, which would prohibit commencement of any development until the submission of wastewater impact assessment to confirm that either a sewage connection could be made or an alternative provision for disposal of sewage. In this case, confirmation has been provided from the agent that he is satisfied an engineering solution for disposal of wastewater can be found. Accordingly, in line with the approach of the PAC as set out above, officers consider that the imposition of a negative planning condition is necessary and would address the concerns raised by NI Water. That condition would prohibit commencement of any development until a wastewater impact assessment confirms that a sewage connection can be made or that alternative provision for sewage disposal of sewage is made. On balance, officers consider the proposal complies with the strategic plan and policy statement from Northern Ireland and all other relevant planning policies, and I recommend that the application be approved subject to the recommended planning conditions. And I'll just take you through the slides. And the blue arrow there just shows you where our site is, to the south of the settlement of Loch Brickland. This is just an aerial photograph of the site. Again, the blue arrow shows where our application site is. And the site location map, you can see the application site actually outlined in red. And this is the proposed site layout. You can see the location of the proposed dwelling and garage. And these are the elevations and floor plans of the dwelling that's proposed. And the garage elevations and floor plans as proposed. And this is just a view of the site across from Rathfriland Street. This is looking south towards into the site. And this gives you an idea of the former development on either side of Rathfriland Street, again looking up towards the application site. This is a view of the western boundary of the site. And that's a view of the boundary along with the dual carriageway. And this is a view from the rear site boundary looking north towards into the site effectively. And again, a view of from the northeastern site boundary across the site. And a view across the site from the northwestern boundary of the application site. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Roisin. Members, there's no one here to make representation in either objection or as a supporter. I'm going to bring in Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Roisin. Obviously, we've discussed this matter before about applications that come from a statutory refusal and so on, how they're dealt with. What assurances do we have that, say, for example, we do go with this approval, even in spite of foul sewage, water uncertainty, that a solution can be found or will be found? Because the last thing we want to do is approve a property and then the developer to go ahead and install some kind of substandard solution that ultimately the buyer of this property may not be aware of and could cause significant impact on the residential amenity. If things don't meet standards. I suppose what assurance do we have that nothing will occur before a very appropriate standard solution is given for the water issues before we were to take any decision on this? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. I'm going to bring in Roisin to clarify.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Officers are recommending a condition, which would be a negative condition, so that no development could commence on this site until a wastewater impact assessment is submitted for consideration. Now, NI Water, they provide a wastewater impact assessment service, and they will provide a site-specific development solution, an engineer's report detailing potential developer-funded solutions to overcome wastewater capacity constraints and to facilitate new development in the area. So basically, they will provide that engineer's report to tell the developer what is required to deal with the disposal of sewage, and the condition on the planning approval would require that they can't start any development until that wastewater impact assessment has been done and that engineering solution has been agreed.
Thank you, Roisin. I'm going to bring in Alderman Wilson, please.
Yeah, just based on that and looking at the site and its size, is it not the case that the applicant could have a normal, NIEA approved consent to discharge and a standalone, type septic tank system that anybody else that isn't within distance of the public sewage system would? I mean, at home I've done that and it's fully approved, and you get it emptied once a year for free by Northern Ireland Water. Is that not an option in this instance? I mean, for a standalone dwelling that has adequate space around it, I'm just curious to, without the need to access the public sewer.
It probably depends on who owns the land to the rear of the property, but I'm going to bring Roisin in.
Thank you, Chair. I think the purpose of the condition is that he would investigate, all possibilities in terms of how this could be dealt with. Obviously, what you're talking about would require consent to discharge from NIEA. There may be difficulties with that, we don't know, but the condition would protect against any development commencing until something had been investigated and agreed that there is a solution to dealing with the sewage problem.
that clarify your question, Alderman? Yeah, members, any other questions? Councillor Duffy.
Yes, Chair, just on a different issue, would a noise report not have to been submitted with this as the proximity rate on the A1?
You're quite right. There is potential for noise impact from the traffic on the A1, but we have consulted with environmental health, who have recommended that subject to the imposition of conditions, that the noise issue would not result in the loss of amenity. So you'll see there's conditions there that are recommended in terms of ventilation, in terms of double glazing. That's proposed in terms of conditions number 7 and 8 as dealing with those issues in terms of noise.
Many thanks, Roisin. Any other questions, members? Okay, no, we're going to move on to your views and thoughts, members. Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly it's an interesting application because I think it highlights the growing age of our NI water, network infrastructure. I think we're going to be faced with a lot more of these type of situations. So I think it's important that the committee keeps an eye on it, particularly with regards to larger applications, which may be more localized solutions, but will be difficult to implement and costly. Ultimately, we need investment from the Northern Ireland Assembly right across Northern Ireland for improvement. The capacity, we're a growing area in the APC Council, so we may be faced with this a lot more. Talking about the specifics of this application, I'd be content with approval, provided those conditions. They just would really strongly encourage that we keep an eye on it in terms of enforcement to make sure everything is to standard before any work commences, to protect the amenity of the future residents whenever that occurs. But I think it's certainly one to keep an eye on, but I can content with the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. It might be that we're an area that everybody wants to come and live in. Any other questions or views, members? No. Can I get a proposer? Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, I'm content to propose. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alderman. Councillor Lavery.
Seconded.
Thank you very much, members. We have a proposal and a seconder for the recommendation. We all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Move on to Appendix 5, application number LA08 2019-1133F, and it's Mr. Kyle Elder, Senior Planning Officer, to present report on PowerPoint presentation. I want to bring you in now, Kyle.
This plan application seeks full plan permission for the erection of a residential development comprising of 66 two-storey dwellings, 24 of which will be detached, 42 semi-detached, internal roads, associated parking, landscaping, public open space, drainage, ancillary works, and the provision of a right-hand turning lane onto Silverwood Road into the development at Dan's 100 metres east of 25 and 27 Silverwood Road in Lurgan. The application is before you this evening as it's a major plan application. Officers have taken it, members have read the report in full, and as such, this is a synopsis only. The application site is located within the development limits of the Craigavon urban area on Phase 1 zoned housing land, LH1, with the proposed access provided through land zoned for light industry and warehousing, LA6, as defined by the Craigavon Area Plan 2010. The site is currently used as agricultural lands, but is in close proximity to other dwellings along Silverwood Road, Silverwood Industrial Estate to the southwest, and the railway line, which is further southeast of the site. Proposed development is considered to comply with the key site requirements of zoning LH1, and officers raised no conflict between the proposed development and the Craigavon Area Plan or the SPPS. Therefore, the proposal to develop the site for residential purposes is considered acceptable in principle. Regarding the proposed design, layout and amenity, officers raised no concerns. The proposed density is considered to be acceptable for this area. A concept plan for the entire zoning has been provided for information purposes, but the proposed layout is deemed acceptable in the context of the Create and Place document with sufficient open space provision. Layout has been designed to allow vehicular and pedestrian access to potential future phases of the development. The site also feeds into existing cycle networks and footpaths with a cycle lane along the access road to the housing development. The layout is considered to respect the existing natural features of the site with substantial enhancement of these features and planting proposed. Members are advised that the development is considered to create no conflict with the policy provisions of PPS 7, the addendum to PPS 7, PPS 12, or creating places. The open space provision and landscaping arrangements are deemed appropriate, with further landscaping requirements conditioned as necessary. A transport assessment form has been submitted and considered, as has the transport assessment, which is considered the entire LH1 zoning, which is based on approximately 516 dwellings. To facilitate this development, the Ghost Island right-hand turning lane is deemed necessary and is proposed for this application. Additional works will be required for future phases. A total of 136 in curtilage parking spaces and 42 on-street visitor parking spaces have been provided, and officers raised no concerns with the parking arrangements in the context of the parking standards document. DFI roads raised no issues with access arrangements and parking provisions. Officers therefore are satisfied that no conflict exists between the policy provisions of PPS 3. A drainage assessment accompanied this plan application. Officers in consultation with DFI Rivers are content that the measures proposed will effectively mitigate the flood risk to the proposed development and from the development elsewhere, such that the proposal complies with policy FLD3 of PPS 15 revised. Members will, however, note that a condition has been included requiring a final drainage assessment to be provided. A flood risk assessment has also been provided, and officers raised no concerns regarding policy FLD1 of PPS 15 revised. So overall, officers are subject to inclusion of the aforementioned condition, raise no concerns regarding the policy provisions of PPS 15 revised. The impact of the development on natural heritage and the environment has been considered in the report. The site is hydrologically linked to the Lough Neagh and Lough Beg Special Protection Area, which are of international and national importance and protected by the Habitats Regulations and Environment Northern Ireland Order 2002. Following consultation with DERA and Shared Environmental Services, officers are content that the development can proceed without any adverse effects on the integrity of these sites. An ecological statement has been considered and the Natural Environment Division of DERA raised no concerns. So overall, officers raised no concerns regarding the policy provisions of PPS 2. Officers also raised no concerns regarding contamination following consultation with the regulation unit of DERA and the Environmental Health Department concerning a contamination preliminary risk assessment. Environmental Health have also considered a noise impact assessment and odour air quality impact assessment, and officers have applied necessary conditions to overcome any concerns and protect residential amenity. NI Water have advised that there's available capacity at the wastewater treatment works, but there are ongoing wastewater network constraints in the Lurgan area. So officers have conditioned the submission of the final method of sewage disposal prior to the commencement of the development. No objections have been received regarding this plan application. So overall, officers consider the proposal to comply with the local development plan, the policy requirements of the SPPS and all other relevant planning policies. And on that basis, approval is recommended for the reasons outlined in the report and subject to the conditions suggested in the report. I'll just take you through the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so the first slide then just shows the location of the site in the general area. So it's just off the Silverwood Road to the west or northwest of Lurgan Town Centre. Next slide then shows an aerial overview of the site. So you can see it's currently agricultural lands with Silverwood Industrial Estate to the southwest and then other housing developments in the nearby vicinity. Next slide then shows the site location plan. And the next slide shows the area plan. So the access to the development goes through land zone for light industry and warehousing, but the proposed housing is on phase 1 housing land. The next slide then just shows the So I think, yeah, it just shows the layout. So there you can see the access laneway to the main development. And the next slide then just shows a zoomed in version of the layout. The next slide then, this is the overall concept. So you can see the access coming from the Silverwood Road, and this is just a concept for how the entire zoning may be built out. Next slide then is the proposed landscaping plan. So we have existing boundaries which are being enhanced, and then new boundaries and quite substantial planting proposed along them. Next slide then shows some of the proposed house types. So this is one of our detached house types, followed by another detached house type on the following slide, and then some of the semi-detached on the following slide. In terms of landscaping, there's no retaining structures proposed within this development, but these are the proposed landscaping treatments. The next slide then shows some of the sections through the site, and then which is followed by the PSD drawing. And on the next slide then you can see the access, which has the right hand turning lane. The first photograph then you can see is taken from the Silverwood Road. So the first field there is this land zoned for light industry and warehousing, with our site further behind the hedging there. The second site then is just a similar photograph of our site behind the hedging. The third photograph then shows a photograph across the frontage of the site to the left hand side, and this is where the right hand turning lane will be placed. And then this slide then it's facing away from Lurgan, again across along the road, and you can see the access to numbers 25 and 27 Silverwood Road, which are shown on this slide. The next slide then is just a photograph of the site to be developed. So that's a photograph of the site facing east, and then followed by a photograph facing northeast, and finally then a photograph facing north. And you can see there the rising land to the left of the photograph, which is outside of the application site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. In attendance via Zoom, we have David Gilmore, Adam Larkin, Colin Stewart, and Tim Collins. Colin, can you hear me okay? Can you confirm which one you are? Because there's two of you on Zoom. And who's the gentleman beside you?
Tim Cousins, not Collins.
No problem. Thank you very much. Okay, going to open up the questions. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kyle, for that very informative presentation. One issue that I know certainly Lurgan members will be aware of is that area of North Lurgan is a very high demand for social housing. I note that it states that it's for private dwellings and so on. Can you confirm if any of those are expected to be social housing, or if planners give any consideration that a portion of that, this application or the overall, larger site will be given to social housing to help partially satisfy that demand in the North Lurgan area? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to bring in Kyle again.
Yeah, we have give consideration to social housing provision. So in this instance, no social housing is proposed. On the site, it is fully private housing. So ultimately, when the plan application was submitted back in 2019, the social housing need in North Lurgan was for 80 units, as identified in the 2018 housing needs assessment. So during this period, 114 social housing units in North Lurgan have either been completed or programmed for works, which is in excess of the 80 units that was required at that time. So we did conclude on that basis that there was no social housing requirement for the site on that basis. But in addition to that, as you've seen from the presentation and from the report, there is challenges obviously in trying to develop this site as a large site, having to go through industrial land. So there is extra cost on the developer for this phase of houses for the 66 dwellings proposed. They're having to provide the right hand turning lane at a cost. They've had to do a transport assessment for the entire zoning. There's the access road to the development is 6.7 meter distributor class access road, so that's to allow future bus access through that development from Silverwood Road linking on to the Kiln Lane, which obviously would have other costs associated with it. And again, there's cycleways and footways along that 300-meter stretch as well. So there have been costs. So yes, we have considered the social element, but we have concluded in this instance that there is no requirement to provide it on that basis.
Thank you very much, Kel, for that response, Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kel, for that informative response. I just noticed that you mentioned a figure of 80 units. I think when Housing Executive presented to us last year, the social housing need in Lurgan was over 200 in North Lurgan. I think it's one of the largest areas in Northern Ireland, certainly the largest in this borough. So certainly it's one to keep in mind in future. I don't know whether the developer at this stage has in mind. I know this is obviously phase one. We're talking about probably 8 or 9 phases in this overall side. If the developer has in consideration in future that any future phases be partly considered for social housing development, given that need in North Lurgan. I think you mentioned the developer agent was online if they want to be brought in there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Who wants to respond to that? Adam, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Members, I'll respond to Councillor Lavery's query there. At this stage, this proposal, 66 units, is on about 4 hectare part of the zoning. The overall zoning is in excess of 40 hectares. The applicant at this stage is not proposing to develop other parts of the zoning. Those lands are outside of his control, so we cannot obviously speculate what may or may not come forward in terms of social housing development on the remainder of the zoning. I'd reiterate what was said there by the planning officer, in that in order to open up this part of the zoning, it was a requirement that the access onto Silverwood Road was provided. This has been done at the applicant's own expense, and that will ultimately benefit future developers on this part of the zoning. And as was mentioned there as well, there's been the design of that access is to accommodate buses and is to accommodate a cycle lane. So there's a lot of public benefit coming out by the developer opening up this section of the zoning. But in terms of what may come after that, that's something beyond our control and that we can't speculate on at this moment in time.
Thank you very much, Adam. Does that answer your query? Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to bring in Damien.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just to go back to Councillor Lavery's point, Chair. Councillor Lavery, it is a very good point, and you are right. The number of affordable units now, social units now identified by the Housing Executive in North Lurgan is over 200. It's around 248. And notwithstanding what was said by the agent, other applications do come forward for that area of land by other developers. It certainly does remain on the table for officers to engage with those developers about the possibility of delivering out on the social housing units that are required in the North Lurgan area. So yeah, look, it is one that will remain on the officers' radar. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Damien. Any other questions, members? No. Okay, move on to debate. Any thoughts or queries? Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. I don't expect there'll be much of a divisive debate in this one. I think we're all agreed that, obviously we've got the previous outline zoning, and this is obviously the first phase of it, and I think it's good to see the continued residential growth in Lurgan. I think one issue that I did highlight, it is the social housing need in North Lurgan. albeit, the 80 units now is what trebled than what it was in 2019. I think that shows accelerated growth for social housing need in North Lurgan. And ultimately, it needs to come into planners' minds in a more greater and greater emphasis and future applications and future development sites, because ultimately we need to provide social housing need for an inclusive society. But that's maybe one for another day. And this application will be content with the recommendation to approve. Don't know if any other members have any thoughts, but that's my own on it. And again, nice to see the mention of cycleways and active travel and so on through these developments. And given it's such a big development, it's good that there'll be walking opportunities for people where I'll have to go on a circular route round to get from one side of it to the other, one road to the other, that they're able to walk through and access, access routes onto Lock Road and Kiln Lane and Silverwood Road and things like that. So it seems to be a well thought out application in terms of the wider scope of it too.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. And active travel is something that we as council are promoting. Councillor Duffy, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And if that was a proposal by Councillor Lavery, I would be happy to second it. And it's just a pity the number of houses fell short of our play and leisure strategy for a play park in the area. And maybe they'll take it forward when they open up this whole area for more houses.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Lavery, was that a proposal?
Well, council were in the debate stage, so didn't want to jump the gun, but if members are content, I am content to approve the recommendation there.
Thank you very much. There's no other lights on, so we'll take as a proposal by Councillor Lavery and second by Councillor Duffy. All agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members, and thank you very much, gents, for your time on Zoom. We move on to Appendix 6. I'm going to make a declaration of interest, as I have when I was in my time as Lord Mayor. I met with the applicant and the owners and the applicant regarding this much needed upgrade in Guildford. So I'm going to hand over to my Deputy Alderman Kennedy and step out of the room. Thank you very much.
It's going to be heard that the first time. LA 08 2021 1215F, Carl Asset Management and Sinead McAvoy is the agent for this one.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the conversion of an extension to the vacant Guildford Mill complex to provide a mixed-use development consisting of a garden centre, restaurant, residential apartments, a rooftop garden, children's activity area and associated servicing, storage, car park and access and landscaping works. Officers have taken that members have read the report in full, and so this will be a synopsis only. The site is located within the development limit of Guildford, outside the town centre, primarily in land zoned for mixed-use development and partially within an area of existing open space. The plan also identifies the site as being located within an area of townscape character, a local landscape policy area and an area of archaeological potential. You will note from the report the application has been accompanied by a design and access statement, a pre-application community consultation report, a Banbridge potential and other survey, preliminary ecology appraisal, landscape management plan, nodal impact assessment, an outline construction environmental management plan, a shadows habitat regulation assessment, a preliminary risk assessment, a transport assessment, a tree survey, archaeological impact assessment, a retail impact assessment, a sequential site assessment, flood risk and drainage assessment, flood modelling and mitigation, quantitative risk assessment, a construction method statement, light impact plan and about mitigation plan. And these reports have all been appraised not only by officers but the relevant competent authorities who have offered no objection. The overall proposal has demonstrated there's no sequentially preferable sites. The retail impact assessments demonstrated both a qualitative and quantitative robust need for this proposal within Guildford. The proposal cannot be found to have significant adverse impact on any town centre within the catchment. The redevelopment of the site for a mixed use of residential and commercial development is complementary to the objectives of the RDS and may bring substantial regeneration benefits not only to Guildford, but to services and jobs for the wider Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough area. Officers consider the current scheme would bring substantial community benefits that outweigh the loss of the open space. Officers consider the proposed area of car parking within the area of existing open space is acceptable, weighing up the material planning history and site-specific circumstances of this case. The river corridor and associated planting will not be compromised by the proposed development. Officers consider that the introduction of a high-quality landscape scheme around the mill complex will enhance the river corridor compared to the existing condition of the site, which has become relatively overgrown and unmanaged over recent years. Guildford Mill is one of the largest surviving flax spinning mills in Ireland and therefore is of national importance. Historic buildings are supportive of the principle of introducing retail and residential uses to these historic structures. Historic buildings have recommended no objection subject to the conditions attached. The development of the historic mill complex will also bring substantial regeneration benefits to Guildford and represent not one of the largest and transformative projects within Guildford and the wider borough. The development also brings substantial benefits to the conservation of one of the most prominent linen mills in Northern Ireland. The mill complex is left vacant and underutilised for decades, and this development can offer a substantial future for the mill complex without compromising the unique character and industrial heritage. Having regard to the above, therefore, and after undertaking a policy assessment and planning balancing exercise, officers are of the opinion the proposed development complies with the area plan, the SPPS, and all other relevant planning policies. And on this basis, subject to the conditions attached within your report, we will be of the opinion that it should be approved. Just taking us through the slides for the site. So it just shows location within the general area. So it's just to the northwest of Guildford Town Centre. It's within the development limit, but outside the town centre boundary. Next slide, please. So that's just an overview of the site at the present time. So it's next to the river there. So it's the existing Guildford Mill Complex. Next slide, please. That just gives you an understanding. The red line is the application site. So you can see it straddles a number of different designations within the plan, which all had to be accounted for. The northern green area is the area of open space. The blue area is the mixed use development. The hash blue area is the area of townscape character. The hash green area is the area of local landscape policy area. And the light blue area is the area of townscape character. Next slide, please. So that just shows the site location plan, again outlined in red with the access to the main Dunburn Road there, and then the river, and the mill race will also be incorporated and retained as part of this scheme. Next slide, please. So that just shows the site layout. So the buildings in question are to the west of the site. So the two to the west, so the main building and then the engine room building to the back, and the existing outbuildings are all as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. So the ground floor plan is the area in which the garden centre will be proposed. So coming into the rear, your car parking will be level access into the garden centre area, and then to the bottom there also will be an extension to the front of the main Guildford Mill, which is for the additional retail garden centre floor space. Next slide, please. That's the first floor plan. So the first floor plan will house the restaurant and children's activity area, as well as the garden, the outside garden area and seating area. So you can, the extension to the front allows for level access to the front of the building. So you can come off, as you know, there's an existing footpath around the river. So you can come from that footpath and get access to the front of the restaurant, up those steps to the open courtyard area into the restaurant, or sit outside. Next slide, please. So these rest of the plans are for apartments. So the second, third, fourth, and fifth are for apartments. Next slide, and the next slide. So that just is the rest are the apartment living above it. Next slide, please. So those are the proposed elevations. So that it's keeping the overall integrity of it. So they're not introducing any new openings, etc. To the rear for building control and health and safety, there has to be a new lift shaft, etc. But this is in glass, so ensure that it's not taken away from the integrity of the built structure. There also will be a link from the engine room building to the main building to ensure that there's one building throughout. And then there's the extension to the front to allow for the additional retail floor space, and also to bring the level of the building to the front up to ground floor level. Next slide, please. So that just shows an aerial view of the site in 1958. So you will probably go from the report that we considered of national importance, and that's one of the criteria why we allowed the development in the floodplain, and that's the pond to the front. You can see from that building that there was always an extension to the front of this building. So by allowing that new extension is actually bringing it back in line with what previously was always there. Next slide, please. So that's a view of the mill when it closed in 1986. And you can also see the front of the building where there was an extension, and that's this development sort of bringing that back into use. Then the other two at the bottom is as it is today, that's the rear elevation, and you can see it is getting into such a use that it's being downgraded. So this hopefully will bring it back to use. Next slide, please. And that's just a few of the main front buildings. So that's the building we're talking about to the west. The buildings to the east are not part of this development project at the present time. So that's the fourth phase, as well as the buildings to the back of that. Next slide, please. Sorry, that's probably a duplicate part. And that's just to the back. So that building to the right-hand side there is the engine room building. So it's part of this proposal that's coming in, and it's going to be the main entrance to the garden centre. And then there's going to be a flat roof link giving it to the main Guildford Mill building, and then there's also going to be a lift shaft to the rear of that, but not protruding above the height of it, so you won't see it from the front. Next slide, please. That's just a close-up of the engine room house building at the present time, so that'll be the main entrance into your garden centre. Next slide, please. That just gives you some internal photographs. You see there's like open plan with these strands up the middle, so we're trying to retain that for part of the apartments. As you can see, they're going to be set back from the openings to the front, and they'll be left open as a sort of a for sitting out area with this a glass balconies over them. So there's going to be there's going to set back, so there's no windows etc in those portions of the site. Next slide, please. So that's just an artist's impression. I suppose it gives you what it's going to look like, and to try to explain that from the front then, with that extension to the front, that will allow a level access from the front of the building into that open outside courtyard area and the restaurant. And then you can see the top of that, the building, the windows are actually going to be open with the glass balustrade to allow for seating out area. And then the stud walls to the back then will be your apartments. Next slide, please. And that's to the rear, so that's the lift shaft building that would accommodate the stairs and the lift. And obviously that type of material won't take away from the integrity of the listed building. And then to the right hand side, that's the engine room, which is going to be the main entrance into the garden centre. Next slide, please. And then that's just another impression, just given the back of it, where the car parking is going to be, and then the buildings to the west is part of a future phase, and so that'll just show it in context. That's me. Thanks, members.
Thank you, Sinead, for that there. I think it was new to me this, but I think next up is Chris Bryson. Are you there, Chris? You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here representing the applicant, and we fully endorse the officer's recommendation to committee to approve the application, and indeed the next application before committee, which is the associated listed building consent application. You've heard from Sinead in great detail of how the proposal complies with all relevant planning policies and guidance, and we won't repeat what the officer has presented to committee. And again, you'll also note that all the relevant statutory consultees are content with the proposal and have recommended approval. As members will be aware, and the applicant is only too aware of how important Guildford Mill is, not only to the village itself, but the wider community and indeed council area. The mill complex has laid vacant for many years, and this project will see the main mill building brought back into use and opened up again to the public. And indeed, it'll act as a catalyst for the regeneration of the wider mill complex. That'll bring great benefits, we think, to Guildford and its residents. It's for these reasons, members, Mr. Chairman, that we would urge members to endorse the officer's recommendation to committee to approve the application and indeed the associated listed building consent application. I have on the call with me as well Richard Lutton, who's of the call group, the applicants for the application, and Rob Jennings of RMI Architects, who are the architects for the project, both of whom can assist me with any questions that members may have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chris, for that. Next up, then Richard Lutton. Clarification. Any questions from members? There's only one light on. Councillor Lowry. For me? You need to turn your own light off. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. I think I'm going to just have to declare an interest. I remember being on the New Ways of Working Group meeting back in 2019. I think this may have been discussed in brief detail. I think that was before any plan application. I think it's still important to declare that, although I'll go into the application with an open mind and things like that. So happy to take part and ask questions, but I think it's just important to declare that. Well, maybe let others ask questions first. Thank you, Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Chair. Not to prejudge any of the outcomes of this application at the moment, but just a question. Is there any timescales if this application is successful for works to commence on these premises? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Sinead.
Chair, this may be one for the applicant, but we would put a 5-year time constraint, so they have 5 years to commence the development. But maybe Alderman Wilson or Councillor Wilson's maybe looking to know when the developer or the applicant's maybe looking to start. So I think they're on the call for clarification. Maybe Richard Luton maybe would be best placed, Chair, to answer that.
Richard Luton, if wants to come on.
Yep, how you doing? Thank you for hearing us. Regarding timescales on the application, it's obviously been in planning a few years, and there's been a few changes since in the environment since the application went in, but we can't really put any timescale on the completion of the scheme, and we wouldn't want to commit to that at this stage. But there has already been a fairly significant investment in the saving the buildings, regarding roofs and the kind of invasive species and stuff around the site. So we have already made quite a significant investment on the site to save it and have it ready to start the development as soon as the permissions come through, and we can get the necessary costs and building works in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm surprised Alderman Wilson didn't come in and say about so much of the building being listed. Would it have much of an impact on the works, on the timescale of the works, and the cost that actually going ahead? And if they want a red phone box, we know they can pick one up.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, in terms of DFI's response to the, being able to exit and enter the site safely, I know the entrance there on the Guildford or onto that main road there, it's near a corner. And there wasn't any, zoomed in photo of the proposed entrance and exit. I'm assuming it'll be, right-hand turning lanes and everything supplied along with that. Just a bit of clarity around that, entrance, especially if there's going to be a phase 2. And will everything be able to be done safely, especially this garden centre, over 200 spaces there, it seemed to be allowed to go on and to and fro on. Just in terms of all that safety and the response from DFI to make sure that that's all above board and you're content.
Yep, thanks. Yes, apologies, Councillor Lavery. There were separate access drones. I should have had them up just to demonstrate, but just as supposed to clarify, yes, there will be a right turning lane in, and there will also be a pedestrian central provision. You'll probably know that access way at the minute. There's actually a telegraph pole right in the centre of it, so that's going to be removed, and then there's going to be a pedestrian part. So then you're crossing from the public footpath, you've got a central reservation, and then takes you on through. It's going to be 2-lane traffic in and out, and it's wide enough then to get a right turning lane there as well. So that will all be up to standard as the present time. So yes, apologies, I should have had the separate access drawn up just to clarify that for you. But yes, right turning lane and a footpath link in, and 2-way traffic in and out.
Yeah, this one's for the planning officer there. I see there when it comes to traffic access parking, that the officers have considered the access and parking arrangement of the extant permission, which proposed 670 parking spaces, and that could have resulted in the loss of significant portion of public open space and the football pitch and council operated play park. Can you expand that a wee bit further, please? Thank you.
Yes, there is an extant permission on this site, which allowed for a lot vast more car parking, which then would extend north into, you probably see from thing, there's a green area, which is open space and woodland. So that we're saying this is a betterment. So while there was a desire for between 280 car parking spaces, this provided 220. On balance, we think that the 228 is necessary response to this particular development without eating into any of those existing community facilities.
Any members, any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at thanks, Nate, for the presentation and looking through the artist impressions, it definitely is an exciting development, and definitely will be very beneficial to the wider Guildford area. There has been a few false dawns with Guildford Mill, and hopefully, if this is approved tonight, that this would be great for the area and for investment and jobs and everything. So it definitely is looking at the artist impressions on we're seeing tonight. Definitely exciting development for the area if approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Chair. So I think we've entered the debate stage, so just give my views. I think on paper, this is probably one of the best ever applications that have come to this committee. You've got it all. You've got protection of historic buildings, new business opportunities, supporting active travel, bringing an area which has been subject to dereliction, not just for years, but for decades, into significant positive public use. So I think it's a very positive application. Obviously, the developer said, uncertainty on timelines and things like that, but obviously need to get the approval first. So I'd be inclined to accept the recommendation to approve once we get into that stage. But seems to be positive days ahead for Guildford in terms of this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Albright. Next up, Councillor Duffy.
Chair, thank you. Just to say, agree with everything that was said there. The drones look fantastic. The solar panels on the roof, thinking of the future. The whole concept of it is just long overdue for the area, and can't wait to see it started if passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. It really is a significant project, so it'll boost jobs and everything in that area if it gets to that stage, which hopefully it will. There's no other members' lights on. Will someone propose a recommendation? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to propose that we accept these the officers' recommendations for Smell. It's exciting development on a development that the Guildford area is crying out for. So happy to propose approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next up, Councillor Lowry.
At the second, Alderman or Councillor Wilson's proposal there.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry. No other speakers on the thing, so everyone's agreed that we accept the recommendation. Thank you, members. Next application is based along the same lines, LA 08 2021 1216 LBC. And again, it's Sinead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Because the full application is now being approved, this application would seek the listed building consent to facilitate that conversion of an extension to the vacant Guildford Mill. So the listed building consent application can go forward in accordance with Section 91 of the Planning Act. Officers in considering this application have given special regard to and considerable weight the desirability of preserving the building, its set and any features of special architectural or historic interest in which it possesses. Policy BH7, change of use of listed buildings, states that the key to survival for these buildings is reuse to be preserved and enhanced. This mill closed in 1986, as you know, and since then the application has changed hands on several occasions. The site was acquired by the applicant, the Carl Group, in 2016 and still remains vacant. As the PPS 6 states, the key to survival and upkeep of listed building is to keep them in active use. This proposal seeks to change the use of the building, and therefore, if the officer's opinion would secure the upkeep and survival of this building. In accordance with policy BH8, officers are content that the essential character of the building and its setting are retained and its features of special interest remain intact and unimpaired. The works proposed make use of traditional and sympathetic building materials and techniques which match or are in keeping with those found in the building, and the architectural details match or in keeping with the building. So in light of all the above, officers consider the proposal complies with section 91 of the Planning Act on all grounds that observes the architectural and historic interest of these buildings. For this reason, officers are also satisfied the proposal complies with the SPPS and policy BH7 and BH8 of PPS 6, and therefore we would recommend that consent is granted in this application also. I haven't done any further presentation, Chair, because it's the same again, so it's up to you.
Thank you, Sinead. We'll bring in the agent, Chris Bryson, if you're there.
Thank you, Chair. Again, as Sinead has said, I don't really have anything further to add following the last application that's been presented and discussed by members. This is really only a listed building consent to go alongside the full application. So we're happy enough to take any questions again that members may have. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's just more or less straightforward, as Sinead said. It's a follow on. So any members, any questions? Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose it's not a question per se, but I know NIA are fairly rigorous in their implementation of these types of projects in terms of keeping with the consents and the listed building status. But it would just be sort of a more public call that there would be a good working relationship between NIA and the developers, that NIA would see the betterment aspect of this and the regeneration that it would bring, and not to be overly onerous, if you like, and accommodate the types of necessary changes that would have to happen within this building. You would bring it up to modern standards internally, and maybe some renewables on that to make it more of an efficient building, because we know with old listed buildings the energy consumption costs can be quite extreme, and there are new technologies now. So I suppose in that regard, just my comment would be a more public call that NIA as an organisation would work proactively with the developers in seeing this project to a completion, and that would be pragmatic and adjustable, if you like, to the needs of a modern society and the types of requirements and savings that will have to be generated from an energy efficiency perspective.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Sinead, any comment on that? No.
Engage with us quite proactively throughout this project. There has been good engagement both with the architect, the agent, and ourselves, and they are very excited with this project. And to be honest, they have been very quick in responding to us. And this list of buildings consent has all the architectural details that we would require, so we don't need to come back into us. It's over 35 drawings of the smallest minute details. It's now, if you accept this consent, will now be approved.
Can I have a proposer that we accept the recommendation?
Happy to propose your approval recommendation, Chair. It's good to see this definitely is a historic building, and this will bring it back to life, as opposed to letting it sit to wreck and ruin. And delighted to propose that we accept this approval. Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Duffy.
Happy to second the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Everyone happy that we accept the recommendation? Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me as we bit green in this modern technology. So that's it. Back to Alderman Barr coming in to do it.
Okay, members. Moving on to appendix number 8, application number LA 08 2022 1520054. And I'm going to ask Mr. Kyle Elder, Senior Planning Officer, to present report and PowerPoint presentation, please. Over to you, Kyle.
This planning application is a section 54 application which seeks to vary condition 5 of plan approval LA 08 2021 1130F, which was granted plan permission for 3 Class B3 industrial units and amendments to an approved warehouse at James Park on the Mahon Road in Portadown. This application is required to go before the planning committee as it's seeking to vary a condition of a major planning application. Officers have taken that members have read the report in full, and as such, this is a synopsis only. Section 54 of the Planning Act Northern Ireland 2011 is a part that allows for an application to be made for plan permission for the development of land without complying with conditions subject to which a previous permission was granted. In considering an application made under Section 54, members must only consider the question of the conditions subject to which the plan permission should be granted. Consequently, the scope of members is in principle more limited when dealing with a Section 54 application, though members are entitled to consider the circumstances that led to the previous original grant of plan permission. Condition 5 required the provision of 2 acoustic barrier fences prior to the occupation of the development. This application seeks to vary condition 5 by reducing the length of the previously approved acoustic fence to the east of the warehouse building with office currently occupied by Amazon by approximately 105 metres. It's proposed that the section of fencing immediately adjacent to the warehouse building and staff car park south of that building is not erected. This fence, as proposed, has been erected around the yard to the north of the warehouse, as has the other acoustic barrier fence adjacent to the side entrance. In support of this plan application, the applicant has provided a letter revising the noise impact assessment. The assessment within the letter was carried out prior to the erection of the existing acoustic barrier fence, but after the occupation of the warehouse by Amazon. The assessment showed that the noise levels from the warehouse when operating were equal to the background at night time and 2 decibels below the background during the daytime for receptors. This is being used to justify the removal of the requirement of the section of acoustic barrier along the side of the warehouse. Officers have consulted with the Environmental Health Department who have not raised any objections to the proposed variation of condition. The Environmental Health Department also advised that they have not received any noise complaints regarding these premises. Officers are of the opinion that this variation of condition complies with the SPPS and policy provisions of PPS 4 and the reason for condition 5, namely to protect the amenity of nearby residents. Residential amenity will be maintained despite the reduced length of the acoustic barrier fence based on the information provided and the consultation response from environmental health. Officers therefore are of the opinion that this variation is acceptable, as the proposal will not prejudice the overall aim of the condition. Members are advised that no letters of objection have been submitted regarding this plan application. So overall, officers consider the proposal to meet the policy requirements of the SPPS and all other relevant planning policies. And on that basis, approval is recommended for the reasons outlined in the report and subject to the conditions suggested within the report. I'll just take you through the presentation now then. Okay, in terms of the location of the site, it's just to the south of Portadown along the off the Mahon Road. The next slide then just shows an aerial overview of the site. So the Amazon building is to the white roof building there to the right hand side of the photograph. Next slide then shows the site location plan. And then in terms of the area plan, the part of James Park, is zoned in industrial land and partially white land. So the section of the site we are concerned with in terms of this fence is within the white land. The site layout plan is on the next slide. So just to the right hand side of the photograph, you can see the dashed line. So that's the section of fence that the applicant seeks to retain, which has been erected. And then in orange alongside of the warehouse and the car park to the south of that is where the fence has not been built, and they're proposing to remove that section of fencing. The next slide then just shows the acoustic fence detail. So the first photograph then, you can see the warehouse currently occupied by Amazon and the acoustic fence there surrounding that area of yard to the left hand side. Next photograph then, again, you can see the continuation of that acoustic fence, which is then continued into photograph 3. The fourth photograph then is taken from the staff car park to the south of the warehouse. So originally this was to be acoustic fence, but has been erected as palisade fencing, and is obviously the area where we're proposing to remove the acoustic barrier fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kyle. We have Gavin Olson of Clyde Shanks Limited online who's speaking rates. If anybody has questions. Okay, members, any questions? No questions. Any views or comments to be made? Okay, can I get a proposal? Alderman Wilson. Right, second. And Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, happy to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Wilson, and Alderman Kennedy.
Happy to second the proposal, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, members. We have a proposal and a seconder proposed by Alderman Wilson, second by Alderman Kennedy. We all agreed? Great. Thank you very much, members. Move on to Appendix 9. Application number LA 08 2020 0681F. I'm going to bring in Trudy Chapman, Senior Planning Officer, to present the report and PowerPoint presentation. Over to you, Trudy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I begin by amending the wording of condition 5 in the report to read: the upper floor of the property shall only be used for storage purposes in conjunction with and which are ancillary to the beauty salon, hereby approved on the ground floor, and shall not be severed to operate as an independent business. Thank you. The application seeks full planning permission for a change of use from a dwelling to a beauty salon, and is before you this evening as a Section 76 legal agreement is required. The site is located within the settlement limit of Armagh City and is within the central area as defined in the Armagh Area Plan 2004. This designation sets out the main town centre uses which would be acceptable and includes shopping, commerce, housing, civic and cultural, educational, ecclesiastical, recreational, leisure, tourism, public administrations, services, and mixed industrial and business uses. Officers are therefore of the opinion that the proposal is acceptable in terms of the use in this location. Members are advised that both DFI Roads and Environmental Health were consulted in relation to the proposal, and both raised no objections subject to conditions which are set out in the report. The proposal does not include any alterations to the external appearance of the property, and therefore there is no adverse impact on the appearance of the terrace or the street scene. No objections were received in relation to the proposal, and officers recommend that permission be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report and the Section 76 legal agreement. And I'll just take you through this PowerPoint, please. So this is the location of the site within the general area. And this is our site location plan. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial photograph of the site within the wider area. So if you're familiar with Armagh at all, you're heading, you've got Home Bargains there to your right, and you're heading up the Moy Road. Next slide, please. So that shows the particular site in question. The area to the left of the site, there's a bit of hard stand you can see, and that's also part of the site, and that's where the parking is to be provided. Next slide, please. So this is the whole terrace. The property in question is the second from the left. Next slide, please. And this is taken from within the site, showing the area that will be used for parking, and the garage there at the back is to be demolished to facilitate that parking area. That garage was part of the previous application that we required the Section 76 for, and as part of that proposal, that garage was to be replaced by a standalone beauty salon just to the rear of that property. And you'll see in later slides then the layout that was proposed as part of that scheme. Next slide, please. So this is showing the rear of those properties. That's an alleyway that leads down the back of all four properties. And the next one, please. And this is taken from the rear garden. These properties have a small yard area, then an alley, and then a garden beyond that. And this is taken from the garden of number 2, looking back towards the terrace. Next slide, please. So these are the existing and proposed elevations. There are no changes to be made externally. And the next one is the floor plans. So this shows that the ground floor is to be changed into the beauty salon. Upstairs, originally there was to be a treatment room, but with concerns over potential noise impact, that was removed. The two areas of dashed lines show what is considered to be buffer areas. So they're really the stairwells, and it means then that the properties on either side are protected by number 2's stairwell, and then the adjacent one on the other side. And they'll act as a buffer for any potential noise. And the next slide, please. So this is the proposed car parking plan. You'll see the dashed line on this one is where the existing garages are, and they need to be removed to provide the parking. The parking here will provide parking for all of the properties along the St. Malachy's Terrace. And then the next should be one more slide. No, there we go. There was a slide to show you the other one, just to show you that there was, you've maybe got the earlier version of it, Paula, but it basically just showed that you couldn't really operate the two to have sufficient car parking. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trudy. Okay, over to you, members. Any questions? No questions? Any views or comments? Okay, can I get a proposer and a seconder? Proposed or Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am happy to propose to accept the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Duffy?
I'll just second the recommendation. Sure, thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Proposed by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Duffy. We all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. We move on to Appendix 10, application number LS 08 2023-1763F. And that's an application by Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. And we're going to bring in Nicola Craney, Senior planning officer to present report and PowerPoint presentation. And Nicola, you're over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal has been submitted by Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council for replacement bus stop net, which is 120 metres long and 25 metres high, and it's in Loughgall Country Park and Golf Course, which is owned by the council. The recommendation is to approve and there's no objections to the proposal. The main policy consideration is OS 3 of PPS 8, open space sport and outdoor recreation. Officers are content with the design, the visual character and amenity, including residential amenity. There's no traffic or parking requirement for this form of development. The proposal has been designed to a high specification and there's no impact on the existing vegetation adjacent to the site. And we could go through the presentation, please. Short presentation. So this is the site then just south of Loughgall. Next slide, please. And you can see the site, it's immediately next to Loughgall Football Club. Next slide, please. That's the location plan. Next slide, please. It's just showing you the area. It's just immediately in front of that band of trees. Next slide, please. That's the elevation proposed. Next slide, please. And it's just, you can see the golf, you can see the floodlights for the football club, sorry, just immediately behind. So it'll be right in front of that vegetation. I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm going to bring in Councillor Duffy, please.
Yes, thank you, Nicola, for the report. Will the works or the installation be carried out from the golf course side, or will they be doing the work from the Loughgall Football Club side?
Thank you very much, Councillor Duffy. Nicola.
From the location it's proposed, the red line, it would seem to be from the country park and golf course side, not the football club side. In order to avoid the vegetation, I think it needs to be from that side.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Happy with that response, Councillor. I'm going to bring in Councillor Armstrong, please.
It's I'm assuming that the works to take place will probably be more winter months rather than during summers to stop impeding the golf there while during the summer there. So just wondering if it's going to be through the winter time, the works taking place.
We can't control the exact time scale. We put on a condition that it should be commenced within the 5 years of the permission. So the time scale for implementing it is up to that section of the council that will be dealing with that.
Thank you very much. I suppose you need for that to your states. Okay. Any other questions, members? Okay. Any views or comments? Can I get a Councillor Duffy?
Yes, Chair. Just like it on record, they're not putting that nets up because of my golf. I've played the course a few times and I don't think I've been into Sam Nicholson's football pitch yet.
Going to see your new nickname called David. Councillor Armstrong.
I'd like to second it on the basis that it's probably my golf shots that are heading in there as well. So I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillors. Councillor Duffy, did you make a proposal there? Yeah, proposed by Councillor Duffy, second by Councillor Armstrong. Are we all agreed? All agreed, members. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for your patience this evening. It's been a long drawn out day and very successful day. And thank you very much, and safe home members and council officers. And can I ask ICT to please stop the feed?